All right, so um, welcome to the webinar. The webinar is called Hotel Technology Decisions to Make Now to Speed Recovery. My name is Paul Peddrick. I've been advising hotel companies on digital touchpoints for about 20 years now. I was formerly with TIG Global and then with Micros, and now I'm an independent consultant. I'm joined by a group of panelists for this discussion, Bob Graham of Temple, Richard Volta of Mews, and Yash Shah of ROOMDEX. Before I let them introduce themselves, I just want to set the stage for our discussion, the things that we're going to be talking about today. As everyone is aware, COVID-19 has kind of turned everyone's lives upside down for now a few months. The spread of the virus has been, massive on industries worldwide, which has had a huge negative downstream effect on our industry in particular. Canceled rooms and flights are hitting the hotel and tourism industry very hard, obviously. As we look across the US in particular, the reopening progress has been very uneven. I read the news today. It said that Texas had kind of halted its reopening plans in light of kind of a surge that they're seeing in new infections. This variable recovery hurts travel more than other industries because we have to be concerned with not just the conditions of the market that we're operating in, but also, of course, the feeder markets, the markets that the travelers are actually coming from. So our concerns are the concerns of Texas, even if we were in New York. Hoteliers are going to have to be creative when it comes to their pricing and canceling conditions, given this environment, given what's happening right now. And we don't really know what's going to happen next. As we can see, this is a very organic process in terms of the way the virus is spreading and therefore how policy reacts in different places in the world. What hotels are going to need to do is they're going to have to develop some long-term strategies to rehabilitate themselves and to make up for the losses that this crisis is creating over the next year and maybe 2 years. As you've heard over and over, this is not going to be business as usual. The competition for guests currently is already fierce, and being a poor performer in your comp set can have dire consequences. So this webinar is essentially asking the questions: how can new hotel technologies be the catalyst for your recovery? We're going to be discussing these kinds of ideas in this, but I want to, and before I get to introductions, I also want to take a moment. We're going to be answering a bunch of questions on here, some that we've already prepared, but also we'd like to hear questions from the audience. So if you open up your little Zoom Q&A window, you can enter your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of the program here. So first, for introductions, Bob, can you give us a start with a quick intro, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thanks for having me. I'm Bob Graham. I'm the CEO at Temple, and we're a modern sales and catering software company, and we serve hotels with and without meeting space. So hotel sales tools if you don't have any meeting space, and then full catering and event management for independent hotels, management groups, and chains.
Thank you. Richard, how about yourself?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me as well. So I'm Richard Volta. I'm the founder of Mews Systems. So we're primarily a PMS, and I started the company 12 years ago as a hotelier. I was building a hotel in Prague, and I didn't actually want it to work with a standard reception. So I thought about, how can we actually really kind of bring a great guest experience with mobile technology. I couldn't see anyone kind of out there doing the same thing, and so that's essentially where the start of Mews kind of came from. But I think it's held us in good stead. We started out as a kind of cloud first and mobile first company, and I think that that's very relevant to today, when I think more and more hoteliers are asking themselves the questions of, how do I innovate my service offering and my guest experience offering in a world that, perhaps is going to be needing that kind of that traditional layout less and less, and you're going to be thinking about, how do I still remain relevant to the customers even when I'm not able to actually kind of greet them at the front desk. And so, we've been growing it for a number of years now. Very happy to be here in the US as well, and growing our presence more and more over here. So look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Richard. And then finally, Yash Shah.
Yes, hi, Paul. Thank you. So my name is Jos Schaap. I am currently a founder and CEO of ROOMDEX, which is a company that we just founded in March this year. So it's very new. We're going to focus with this new company on hotel automation. The initial focus will be around room upgrade and room upsell, but our long-term focus is to find processes and parts of a hotel that we can fully automate with the support of surrounding systems such as a PMS and a sales and catering system. Prior to ROOMDEX, I founded Stay in Touch, built it up to a very nice company in my opinion, and sold it in 2018 to Shiji Group. Prior to Stay in Touch, I was almost 18 years at Micros, where I was largely responsible for the growth of the Opera hotel systems around the globe. Paul.
Cool, thanks very much, appreciate it. All right, so let's get into the technology discussion. So one of the things that's interesting about, well, tragic but interesting about the COVID-19 is that it really came on relatively quickly, you know, for the hotel industry. I would say it came on quickly in terms of it escalated to the point where it was, it kind of hit businesses quicker than they were prepared for. And what happened is that actually a lot of hotels had to close down or reduce staff very quickly, sending actually some staff to work from home. That has a direct impact on accessibility to your hotel technology stack. And now accessibility and flexibility of your PMS and your hotel tech stack is actually something that is now on the table. Richard, you had made some great points in your introduction about how some of the nature of your PMS is very much an impact on the way you're conducting business under the new COVID environment. Can you tell us, like, can you make a comment on premise-based versus cloud-based PMSs, accessibility, flexibility, and so forth?
Yeah, I think, you know, back in 2012 and even, you know, I'd say even up until fairly recently, we would always get the question of, you know, but what about on-premise, and aren't there situations when basically you need an on-premise you know, driver and situation? And I think that, you know, this is one of the things that is, if anything, a blessing to kind of to look at it from the fact that I think it's proven to everyone, and it's proven, you know, to, I think, anyone in hospitality, that actually having something in the cloud gives you a huge amount of resilience. I think we hear about stories where, you know, still with, you know, some of the largest players, basically you have to go, you know, there's still some hotel groups are still sending in people basically every single night to perform their night audits. You know, that they have to actually go into the property, you know, and that was, you know, in the worst parts of the lockdowns, that was still happening. And I think, you know, in 2020, that just shouldn't be happening, and you shouldn't be kind of needing to actually do those types of processes, and you shouldn't need to actually kind of, you know, have that tying to the space. And I think one thing that is great, I think, for hoteliers to think about as we come out of this is, you know, the idea of the fact that you can be flexible with the space. You know, you can think about, you know, well, how does my property, how does my hotel actually look like if I don't really need to have that front desk, if I don't need to kind of give out the key at the front desk, if I can somehow work with mobile key providers, you know, and then where is the added value that I can actually kind of go to from there? And I really believe that actually this is a great opportunity for an explosion of creativity that can again basically come into hospitality. I think in the same way that you saw it in, you know, 100 years ago, the 1920s were really the times when, you know, most of these kind of hotel concepts that we know and love today, about, you know, even having a bathroom in the same room as you're in, that's really kind of where that explosion of creativity came in. And I feel that, you know, in some ways, you know, we keep on repeating the phrase that, you know, you shouldn't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think this is a great time for hoteliers to come together to actually think about, you know, how can I use the technology that's out there that exists today to actually plan for the next 100 years of my operations.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's, you know, it kind of speaks to the nature of the perception of what service is. And, you know, is it, you know, now with people wearing masks and social distancing, this concept of being able to provide person-to-person services is not actually a plus as much anymore for some people. I mean, maybe now that's become an older tradition, and the newer tradition needs to.
Like I wouldn't. Sorry to talk, but like I don't think that that's going to kind of leave. I think one of the things that we keep hearing actually from people that are coming to hotels that are opened is just how much of a relief it is for people to kind of have that back, to have the. But I think it then actually kind of comes to the fact that you are, that's the real service, the experience of really talking to someone. I think if the only interaction that you have with people is about admin, that really isn't the type of service, and it isn't the type of, experience that you really, really want to kind of build up with someone, to make it memorable, to make it something that's, worthwhile for that person, if only for the fact that they remember it for the absolute convenience that they actually kind of remember through that process. And I think that's the real challenge, to make sure that we're kind of driving for this, greater experience and greater serviceability, and to provide those types of tools basically, so that when we do interact, it really, really is something that resonates with people. And it doesn't need to be this kind of, that you're almost talking to one of those kind of faceless robots. So, yeah.
Yeah. So Jas, you having been, also running a PMS company that was also cloud-based, it's not the same thing, but it goes hand in hand, is this concept of SaaS versus a more traditional fee structure. If you have a hotel who says, yes, I have this old PMS, but it's doing the job I need, I'm getting by with it, and it's much cheaper than the monthly ongoing costs of a SaaS PMS, what would be your response to that?
I think that person that has that thought should have a second, thinking right now. And I mean, it's to some extent, to that point of view, I think COVID-19 is a terrible wake-up call, I think, for many hotels that were not prepared for a thing like that, where they had to close down a hotel. If I go back to my time at Micros, the concern was more, if you put it in a hosted environment, will the internet be working? But kind of this whole COVID-19 reversed the whole thing. Internet is kind of there, it's a given. It kind of always works. And there's always a way to get around it if it doesn't work, because most people have it on their smartphone also as a personal hub. So it's easy to get to. So sticking with an older PMS that does the job is probably not the right thing to do. And especially, I think probably a lot of people have noticed that over the last couple of months, because they were not able to get to it, or as Richard mentioned, they had to go to their hotel at night to run that thing. Because even if the hotel was closed for a couple of months, they still had to take reservations, they had to deal with a lot of cancellations. So they probably wanted to do that in a fluent way. So if you stick with an older PMS that's very cheap, that's going to be very difficult to achieve. And on top of that, monthly fees make it also fairly easy to make the investment. You can, it's not an easy job to replace a PMS. It's obviously just the heart of your hotel, so it's not something you want to do every month, but it's a lot easier than it used to be. So for a hotel to go for that monthly fee and pay that perceived little extra is not a bad thing. And ultimately, it's actually a lot cheaper, because most of the time we're not thinking about the hidden cost of having a server in the hotel or all that kind of stuff that you have to deal with. If you just pay a monthly fee, like I do now with most of my things at my startup, I don't buy anything, it's all monthly fees. And the ones I know that I'm going to use for a long time, I buy right away yearly, so I get a discount. But the ones I'm not sure about, I just start monthly with, and if I like them, I can always convert them. And I think that's a much better approach for hotels thinking forward and getting ready for things that we don't know about.
Cool, thank you. So we actually have a question back for Richard. It says there's a lot of conversations about contactless check-in, but not much about how to do excellent remote service. Do you agree that there needs to be a convergence between the many ways that hotels can communicate with guests and staff, and how content about the hotel, for example, city guides and how to operate the room, et cetera, is shared between systems, everything from saved replies for emails to chatbots, brand website, voice, et cetera? So very detailed question there for you, Richard.
Like I think that kind of speaks to the fact of, you know, I guess what both Jos and Bob are basically doing and how they're kind of building their business and Jos's previous business as well. I think the modern way is the fact that, you know, everyone should actually kind of be communicating through very smart APIs. Everyone should basically be, you know, dealing with real-time information, and it doesn't really matter if it's basically you know, somebody asking about, you know, a banquet that they might want to actually kind of sell, you know, or if it's basically a singular person. I think the one thing that we need to actually kind of change our minds to, and I think again it kind of reminds me of the kind of the founding story of Mews, is that, you know, for me it was really kind of, I didn't think that the guest journey started from the moment that somebody walked in through the door, which is how I think most hoteliers basically think about it. The moment really starts when, you know, you can basically make the case that it starts at the time of ideation about, you know, where you're going to, what kind of experience you're planning to have there. But I think it really starts from the moment of when they've kind of committed to the hotel, committed that they're actually kind of coming to stay. And I think that's when the hotel needs to kind of almost think about that guest being almost in-house. And I think that, you know, all of the things that Catherine mentions in that, you know, about city guides, about, you know, the personalization of that service, and about the way that you're going to kind of, you know, make the most of that guest. I think that's the really exciting thing. And I think that there are so many, you know, exciting app providers, you know, everyone in the marketplace. You know, you can go to, for example, Hotel Tech Report to see who are some of the most, you know, innovative thinkers when it comes to that. You know, you can see all of the different, you know, companies like Get Your Guide, you know, Airbnb, for example, with their experiences, trying to actually kind of bring about this this idea that, you know, when you're at a place, you should really make the most of it. And I think that that's the way that I think hoteliers should be thinking about it. Just, you know, how can I actually kind of bring as much of that into my context so I can actually advise the guest who is in-house, basically, you know, prior to their arrival, how can they already start experiencing what they're going to actually kind of experience when they come? And I think that, you know, speaks to, for example, you know, if their main concern right now is cleanliness, you can take them on that kind of tour. You can take them on those, you know, you can upsell them basically different ways that you can kind of look at that. And I think that that's really the mind shift change that we all have to have. It's not about who's physically in the building, but who is actually kind of has committed to actually arrive and experience, you know, the full experience that we represent basically as a hotel.
Right.
I want to add something to that, Paul, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's a very good question, because yeah, the check-in itself is only the check-in, but I think what hotels need to think about is how can we, you know, to Richard's point, how can we from the moment they book, or even prior, how can we engage with them until they actually arrive and during the stay? And, you know, things like digital messaging. You know, you go to Hotel Tech Report, as Richard mentioned, there's quite a few of those applications out there that are fairly simple to implement. And Catherine is just asking about some content management, that they don't need any content management. All the content they really need is your communication with the guest directly, and it can go in sync with your you know, your mobile check-in process. And at that point in time, you are allowing guests to answer questions or ask questions, and you can answer those questions. And one thing I think what's also really important, especially the coming months, is you need to communicate not only that you have a clean hotel, you also need to communicate what's open around your hotel. What can I do around my hotel? I actually took put on my travel boots for the first time in 3 months last week to go to California and spend a week there. That was my first time traveling. Never seen a plane as clean as that before. And it was I felt very safe and very clean doing all of that. I stayed in an apartment in Santa Cruz, but around Santa Cruz there was you know, I had to find out where can I go, what restaurants are open, how does it work, sit inside, can I sit outside? So all these things require communication with the guests. They're going to be very cumbersome if you have to do them over phones. You can do them with technology such as guest messaging. You're to a great advantage, and it's very easy to integrate these type of things. Simple one-ways can already do the job with PMS systems such as Mews, Stay in Touch, even Opera. It's fairly easy to achieve those things. Paul.
Thanks. Let's move on to, we have a few questions. We're going to try to get to all of them, but I want to move back to something a little bit more sort of technology specific, and when it comes to operations. We're seeing like a lot of new regulations that are happening, local laws, you know, I'm not sure if they're state or federal yet, such as having to keep a room empty for 24 to 48 hours. And we're likely to see more of this sort of thing as particularly state governments are trying to come up with policies in order to facilitate opening while keeping everyone safe. How does any of our panelists can answer this? How do you feel that the technology can help with these kinds of new COVID generated regulations?
Sure. On the event side, I can say, actually, Richard, one thing you said really resonated with me about redefining the experience. And I live in Canada, so there's a lot of mountains around. Went for a drive and I found a little restaurant with about 12 cabins around it. And they were promoting meetings and events. And I thought, this is the future post-COVID, right? We're not going to be having 50 people in a meeting room at a big hotel. We're going to be outside and we're going to be having a lot more smaller groups and meetings. But that got me thinking too about, you know, maybe the site tour can be done digitally. I know there's technology now where you can design everything in 3D and give guests a virtual walkthrough. I've even seen AR solutions, which are pretty neat, where you can basically lay out the space ahead of time. And we don't do that, but we have partners that do, and it's really come a long way, which is amazing. Also, just look at anywhere where you can automate access. So rethinking of the hotel as kind of a public space, ironically, it would seem like we don't want to make things public during COVID. We want to make them more private. But to me, a hotel has always represented a place that you go in the community, like a center. So I see a lot of my friends on Instagram doing staycations, and you think about, why do you have to give someone at the hotel to give you access to a meeting space? Why can't you book it online, get a little code on your phone, walk up to the door and get access? Go on your phone with an Uber Eats, maybe even text the front desk and say, hey, you know, we'd love 4 coffees. It's a better guest experience. It is automated. But I also like what Richard said about, you're not trying to get rid of service. You're trying to take away the points of service that are strictly administrative, that are actually cogs in the customer journey. Take them out of the way with technology so that when you do see someone, it's, hi, how are you? Welcome back to the hotel. You know, we remember that you loved a mocha, so here it is. And you're thinking, wow, they know about me. They remember my preferences, and everything else is just easy and effortless. So I do see that as the future. I don't think fully booking online for events is going to take over, but I do think we're going to streamline it, and we're also going to add to it. So my last idea here is, why not take what your hotel has and use it to differentiate? So if you've got a great pool, maybe offer that as part of the small meeting package. I'd love to go for a swim halfway through my meeting. Or if you've got a great lobby, why not open that up for co-working a couple days a week, and you can have a breakfast ready, but it's all scheduled and it's basically recurring revenue the hotel wouldn't have had. So reinventing what your property can do to find new revenue sources, open it up to your local community a bit, and just reimagine what it can be. I think that's an opportunity COVID has given us that's really exciting.
Yeah. Like, if I can, so by the way, so if Bob, if you're going to go halfway through this meeting, I'll know that you're probably in the pool. But no, like I completely agree with all the things that you're kind of echoing. Like, I've seen it in my own kind of experience, you know. So I needed to write like a series of really important kind of documents basically last week, and I really kind of needed my headspace. And actually for me, because I'd been kind of on the road so much, actually like planes always did that for me. I kind of sat in the plane and I was in my personal headspace, and I could just actually kind of just get out and kind of go. And so I was actually thinking, because, you know, I've got 2 small children, I've got my wife, like, and it's just like, it's a lot. Like, you're basically locked up in one place for the whole time in New York, and it's just, you know, it's a lot. So I just wanted to actually just get out the house. It's not like I can go to sit in a cafe. I just wanted to actually go and sit in a hotel, you know, that had a good desk that I could actually kind of sit at and work at. And it proved, you know, even in New York City, it proved so difficult for me to figure out, you know, how I can actually kind of see that kind of experience, or where I could actually kind of have that experience, and B, to even kind of book then, you know, to be able to, I ended up needing to, you know, not book a room, but basically kind of actually reach out through email. Then I waited another like half a day before somebody actually kind of got back to me. And it was just a very, very laborious process. And I feel like the main thing that we as hoteliers need to actually kind of really embrace is that, you know, even post-COVID, but especially in this kind of 1 year cycle that we'll have in front of us, we need to kind of think about, you know, what is the most amount of flexibility, because we won't know exactly how that demand kind of comes. Is it the person who's basically just down the road who just wants basically something for half a day? Or is it, you know, an out of towner? Or is it somebody who, you know, can't get back to where they're going to be because they basically need to self-quarantine for the next 14 days? And I think we need to be able to kind of think flexibly about the spaces that we offer. So whether that's, you know, turning certain places into co-working spaces, you know, thinking about the room as basically actually a day use space rather than a night use. All of those kind of concepts, I think, then actually kind of conspire and, you know, come into the fact that we just need to be able to actually think a little bit on our feet. And I think also, if I can be so bold, I think hoteliers in general just need to be able to actually kind of think also about the fact that, you know, the reason why all of us are trying to automate, and Jos's new company, I think especially, you know, is dedicated to the idea of automating a lot of these kind of useless processes. The reason why isn't because the great idea for the hotel is to have no staff basically and just like some Pepper robot or something like that. That's an awful thing for, I think, most customers. But what it is that you actually use that time that you now have in front of you to actually start thinking about, you know, how can I actually work harder for even the singular customer? So not just for the group that has actually kind of come in, but even in that group, how can I personalize it so that not everyone gets exactly the same cookie cutter experience? And how can we work harder for our guests with basically the fact that we now are in this stage where I think for the next year, we're going to be fighting as hard as we can for every single dollar and for every single customer that's actually kind of coming in through our doors.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think, you know, speaking a little bit about automation and the unknown that's going to happen probably over the next 12 months, you know, one thing you can do with cloud and open APIs, I'm sure there is out there right now, people, I'm one of them, but I'm focusing on a particular part of the business, but I'm sure there's companies that are trying to figure out how they can help hotels with some of the rules that are being invented by the CDC and all these other local authorities that have, you know, specific reasons and needs or want to emphasize those onto hotels. You know, one of them potentially is that hotels have to, you know, stop letting the room, if it's occupied by a guest, that cannot be occupied for another 24 to 48 hours, or somebody cannot clean it within 24 to 48 hours. Now, most PMSs today don't necessarily have a algorithm or a simple calculation that manages that component that would require a change to the PMS. But if the PMS has a, you know, an open API and all kinds of ways to connect to that, somebody might come up with the idea to allow hotels to automate the fact that they have to deal with these rooms that have to be empty for 24 to 48 hours, if that's in that particular city or county requirements rule. So automation, and I really like what Richard said, is not necessarily to replace people. It's really to help and get rid of some of these old tasks that we all think are the normal tasks that we have to do, that, you know, we can, quite frankly, software can do them for you, and you can use your time as a hotelier to find new customers and new guests, or really serve your guests to the right, you know, to the right extent. And again, that requires open and API technology to have that.
Yeah, yes. One thing that I was thinking about as Richard was chatting was lead response time, right? So you make a request with the hotel and you wait, you know, you're waiting days to hear back. A lot of hotels have had to furlough staff temporarily, especially on the sales side. There are ways to automate that so you can reply right away, and the stats are somewhere around 50% of the business goes to the first vendor that responds, right? So you want that to be you, even if it's just to bring your people back. And the API integration and connectivity gives you the ability to basically respond to those inquiries really quickly in a way that's personalized. You can even automatically follow up now. It turns off when they reply. and just sort of leverage the staff that you have. So it's a hybrid. It's like a little bit of technology, bringing your people back. Then when they're back, now they have less admin day to day and data entry, and they're more focused on the guests. So I think it's a short-term solution that can get things back online and help grow the business faster. But long-term, it's like you both said, it's just going to give a better experience.
Yeah, good. I think the main thing about technology today, I think we all have this kind of idea that, you know, that it's this kind of android being that basically can do every single thing, and the humans are no longer kind of needed for anything. I think one of the things that we sometimes forget, you know, especially as technologists, we forget just how stupid the technology really is, you know, and just, you know, I think if anyone's kind of been talking to a chatbot recently, they'll know how frustrating it basically is. But I think it's about thinking through the idea of how can you use that? How can, if there's a repetitive question, how can it be answered really, really quickly? Because, you know, it might be 60% of your customers might want to kind of actually understand, you know, where is the pool, or, you know, is this restaurant open, or do you guys basically, like, are you going to be open on this date that I might actually want to kind of travel? Like, those are the types of things that you can actually kind of put into a chatbot. But I think that really kind of breaks you out of having to do those kind of repetitive tasks, so that you can actually kind of insert that real human value and human excellence, which are the real things that I think actually kind of really, like, that's what makes your hotel stay memorable. That's really kind of the service that you're actually kind of selling. So I think if you can think about, you know, what are the things, so like Jos was saying, you know, like getting a programmer to fix a part of the algorithm of basically how the room is assigned. Like, if you have an open API in your system, or you work with a technology vendor that can actually kind of do that, then that's super easy. And I think it's about this kind of mindset that you should be thinking about, you know, what are the different ways that what are the ways that I would like to actually kind of spend my time, and what's the best way to do that? And then what are the best of breed products that I could actually kind of put in? So for example, like, you know, I think all three of us, or all four of us, like, will know, you know, so for example, when we're trying to sell to a hotel or to someone, we use a huge plethora of different kind of services and different ways to actually, when I speak to hoteliers about the same thing in sales, they hardly use the same, like, I've been, you know, the last couple of times speaking to hoteliers, I've been having to explain to them what a drip campaign is, or what basically tools like that actually are. And they're incredibly easy to actually set up in any way. Companies like Drip, or, you know, you have other companies like Chime, all of these different kind of types of services that you can actually kind of add into your service offering that massively help you with all of these different services and different kind of ways that you're actually trying to sell, and make you much better at being proactive, so that you can actually kind of do a hell of a lot more with this kind of technology. And I think they're still kind of stuck also in a mindset that only the tools which are created for the hospitality industry are the only tools that we can use basically within hospitality. And I think when you look at the wide array of what's available in the world of technology, you don't need to actually limit yourself anymore with just the hotel specific tools.
So Bob, along those lines, you know, we've mentioned, we've kind of touched upon this idea of transforming the product that you're selling a little bit, or you know, even like, you know, shared workspaces. Richard mentioned things like that. You were like, you know, build in a hotel swim in the middle of the meeting. What are the kinds of things that, you know, sales teams should be doing outside of a change of the product itself? In their sales activities during this period of time? You had mentioned you know, you touched upon it a little bit, because you said something to the effect that we have, in some cases, furloughed staff. So we're maybe dealing with like less people. These are tremendous headwinds that we're running against, and now we're doing it with less people. Is there specific activities that they should be doing now, as of today, in preparation for sort of the long term?
Sure. So I think in sales systems, we have the same problem as with the PMS. Is in many cases, I've heard of legacy systems that are on site, or even sometimes no system at all. And the salesperson would be developing relationships. Obviously, past business is the best opportunity for future business. And they've been furloughed and they may not come back. And where's that data? So no one can access, who had events and meetings in the past. Also things like corporate rate agreements from previous years. How are you touching base with this corporate business? And if you don't have it stored somewhere, that's obviously a huge problem, because you just lose that. And that's your best source of bringing things back online. Aside from that, I think hotels were fishing for a long time, and they need to relearn the lost art of hunting and prospecting and sales. At Event Temple, when we started, my background was in sales and running a company where I would do a lot of sales. You always did both. And I would talk to hotels about sales, and many weren't doing anything, or even hotel sales as a concept was something they weren't aware of, really. So I think we're going to see that the hotels that win are the ones that understand digital prospecting too. Like in tech, we were all talking about how tech companies do marketing. Well, how tech companies do prospecting too is we use tools like LinkedIn to find the right job title. We go by city. We pull the emails using tools like Hunter.io, and we can do automated at scale reach outs. When they reply, then we can personalize it. And then we can combine that with marketing. So they're getting invites to different digital events, and we're adding them to social media. And it's really easy to set up, but you have to have something where the systems are talking to each other, or you might accidentally be doing outreach to someone who is already on property, and that looks pretty bad. So I think digital prospecting is going to be the future. And I think the hotels that do the sales, especially right now, are going to get the results when things come back. At Event Temple, we talk about revenge travel a lot. And like I was saying, my Instagram is full of staycations from my friends. Everybody's on the island, or hot tub at a Fairmont or something, right? And it's just like they want to get out because we've all been trapped at home. So I think if you're prospecting now, it's going to be the same for business. Like I can't wait to sit down with Richard and Jos in person and talk business. And I'm sure our hotels customers are the same. So I think if we're ready now, 6 to 8 months from now, you're going to be well positioned. But if you don't do it, or it's not at scale, I think you could miss out.
So we have a question from the audience.
I actually just wanted to add to that. Sorry about that. Like, I do think that this is one of the underrated aspects of actually kind of working with a fast growing company like the three of us basically are, is that, a lot of the times you end up actually, and we've seen it with all of our hotels, that you end up actually kind of having this dialogue about how to digitally transform, and what are the different tools that you're actually kind of looking at, and you end up starting to have this kind of dialogue with your service provider about what's working for you and how can I use that actually in our hotel. So on the sales side, I think we can probably name 1,000 tools that we've all kind of gone through, but it's also things like, for example, I'm still shocked at how few hotels have taken the idea of NPS and CSAT, the Net Promoter Score, and really actually kind of worked it in, and to kind of know that only a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 experience is the only one that counts. Basically anything that is a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's just not good enough. And I think that's really kind of that's a metric that we as Mews absolutely kind of live and die by. How likely is a customer to actually promote us to another customer. And I think that that's something, again, that there's a huge well of understanding that the tech world basically has. And I think it would really, really, one of our big kind of presentations is always just about, how hotels should think about, becoming more and more like technology companies. And I think it would really, really suit them well, whilst retaining this, the spirit and the idea of, what it means to actually drive great service, and how to kind of facilitate that in the best possible way.
So you had mentioned, Richard, that you had mentioned some of the things that you've been doing. You mentioned like drip campaigns, which is somewhere between sales and marketing, kind of narrowly marketing. And we have a question here from the audience that basically says, what kind of marketing or campaign might be effective in the post-pandemic or post-pandemic? I'm not sure if we're there yet, or the current pandemic environment. And then the tool that would be best used for this. Now, you'd said, well, be like a technology company. So what are the tools that you might be using that may be applicable there? Or better yet, what are the types of campaigns? You mentioned drip campaigns. Are there other kinds of things that you do to create more visibility and internet presence for Mews that would be applicable to your hotel customers?
I think the easiest ones are basically learn from this, right? You have 4 people that want to kind of like make themselves relevant to their audience, and they're basically talking about something that interests hopefully the audience, that they're not kind of switching off. I think this is a great template. Like, do you have your chef that is actually a super interesting person? Why didn't you kind of talk about that? Why didn't you create a webinar for people? Why didn't you create a small cooking show basically with somebody at home? Why don't you think about those things? And those types of tools, like, it's just a computer. Every single one of us basically should have a computer with a webcam. You know, think about, for example, free tools like Instagram. You know, think about, for example, just saying, like, you know, if you own a hotel that's by the sea or something like that, get people to remind themselves of what of what it feels like to walk through the hotel and come out to the beautiful terrace and basically see the sunset. You know, I think there are so many different ways, and I feel like, you know, as Bob is saying, like, we need to let people in this time dream and to really kind of inspire them by the place that we kind of, you know, are near, or the types of ideas or the types of people that actually kind of work at our hotel. You know, there's always ways to kind of like then think about how you're going to kind of do it so that the HR department doesn't self-combust because everyone's on furlough. But, you know, that aside, I think there are just great ways that you can try and be scrappy, try and be kind of relevant to the customer. And it doesn't need to be, you know, you don't need to teach yourself how to do SQL. You have to start out with, what does my audience really kind of think of right now? And what are the ways that they're, for example, searching? What are the keywords that they might be searching for? How can I hijack those to actually be super aggressive in the way that I try and bring the attention to my website, to, you know, my social media, whatever it might be? How can I actually become relevant and stay relevant to that guest for when they actually want to kind of plan their next journey, or when they want to kind of plan their next event that the entire company is probably dying to get to at the end of COVID?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Ski resorts have been using this model's been out there forever. It's called the snow cam. You know, they've been generating interest and generating desire for travel just by showing how much snow is on the mountain. They're like, oh my God, look, it's like, it's another 3 feet last night, or what have you. I mean, if you think about it, you know, every marketplace has their equivalent. The question is, how do you highlight that, you know?
I think that's, I mean, especially now that most likely the travel for the next 6 to 12 months will be largely local. That means within a region. So, you know, that means you can actually use things you have around your hotel to get your local guests that live 1 or 2 hours away to come in. So things like Richard mentioned, show your guest, I mean, your chef, and have him do something online, cooking show or something like that, something like along the lines of what we do is definitely going to attract you some business, and you can promote that on all your channels multiple times, which is also what we do. And I think the most important part there is that you have people that are engaged and that are like that want to make this a success. Like, we are founders of a company that we want to make work, so we talk very enthusiastic about anything that has to do with that. And if you have plenty of people in your hotel that are the same way, and join that with some technology, simple technology, and you have very quickly a nice new way of getting people to come and see you.
So Jas, I want to pull it back again to maybe some little bit more hardcore technology stuff, you know, I want to talk about API marketplaces. We've been touching upon cloud, and we've been touching upon like integration with other new tools and things like that. For many years now, that other industries have had these API marketplaces, and I think that Salesforce Marketplace, is probably the most renowned one of these. Yeah. They do exist in the hotel world right now. They're growing, and you know, basically what they're proposing is essentially, the Presence is proposing, you know, a different way to think about creating a bespoke solution for the needs of your individual hotel, whether it be sales, operations, or what have you. You've been on the PMS side for many years, Jas. Now you're on kind of the other side of the API exchange with ROOMDEX. What are your thoughts about tech stacks centered around a marketplace model?
Yeah. Well, I think now that I'm on the other side, so to speak, a light bulb went kind of off. Now I realize how hard it must have been for some of these other vendors other than the PMS to connect to a hotel in the past. So we're now in the process of building our integrations to a number of PMSs, and we can see a clear difference between the ones that have a sort of a marketplace or open APIs. Mews has a marketplace. Event Temple has open APIs. Some of the other PMSs, Stay in Touch has an open API, and but everybody else currently is pretty much trying to get to that stage from a PMS point of view, or is claiming that they have it but don't really have it, or has to deal with the fact that the property software is still installed at the property, which complicates the matter. So that from our point of view, if I look at it from a pure software development point of view and bringing our product to market, the more people will be in the marketplace, the more PMS systems have something like that, or if there's a third party that can collaborate between these different parties, the faster we can operate and the more innovation will happen. I think that's pretty much a given. And so I think, the one thing I would say to hoteliers here, now is the time to look at your technology stack, and that's what we're talking about today. Besides, of course, on the sales, the technology stack is the important component. And now that you have, predominantly less guests and therefore less staff in your hotel, this is probably a good time to revisit. Even though you may not have the funds to do that, this is the time to revisit your technology stack. And if you go SaaS, you don't need a lot of funds. And I'm sure right now, most SaaS vendors will work out a deal with you to get you through this time, because they also, like us, we all have to get through this time, and we have to do it together, because if we don't, then there's nothing else left at the end of it. So this is the time. And if you do select the PMS, make sure it has open APIs, truly open APIs, and get that confirmed with some of the vendors you want to have them to connect to that PMS. That's the biggest lesson I've seen in the last couple of months, now that we are trying to connect ROOMDEX to multiple PMSs. I think it's really important to have this open marketplace. It's very good to see that even Oracle right now is moving towards that, but it'll take them some time to get all of their hotels converted, but it's going to be available. And I think the biggest thing also, there's no cost to the hotels when it comes to integration. The integration is either is shared between both vendors, basically. And it's also, because it's so much easier, it doesn't have to cost that much anymore. So marketplace is very, very important, or make sure that your PMS has a very open API that is pretty much free to connect to.
So we're winding up in terms of our available time, and so I wanted to. I think that's an excellent segue to just any last words of our panelists. I'll start with you, Richard, since I think that he was probably touching on some points that were directly related to your company and your product.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hate to be the salesman too much on when primarily I think these webinars are here to try and be helpful, but I do think that the one thing that we all have to kind of embrace, and we've seen it, for example, in ourselves, we've really tried to kind of embrace, what are the things that we can do to come out of this crisis really, really strong? What are the ways that we can actually how do I position my business so that, even if the market doesn't actually kind of come back to, let's say, the levels that it was at before. So, for a hotel that might be 80-90% occupancy, what if it's kind of floundering at 50-60? What are the ways that I can actually kind of look at, the flexibility, the ways that I can think creatively to make sure that I maximize all of that? What are the ways that I can think aggressively about, actually kind of growing my business? What are the partnerships that I need to actually strike up? And I think that's where, it comes very naturally to us to talk about it, because we've been banging on the open API drum for so long. But even if you have a closed system PMS, I think the main thing for you is to then kind of think about, who are my partners, and how can I rethink that entire relationship that I have to them, so that I see them as enablers of the type of thing that I want to do. And I think that that's fundamentally what every single technology is set up, or technology company is set up to do, is that we all want to solve the problems. We all have different ways of thinking about, how we interact with our customers and whether we want to kind of, listen to them all the time. I think some others feel that they know what is right, or that they have the expertise basically behind them. Some are a little bit more, let's say, humble about it basically, and are willing to kind of learn. And I think that's the main thing that we do need to kind of learn as clients, as hoteliers, is that we should be actually kind of, demanding more of the types of experiences that our technology partners are actually kind of delivering for us. And I think from that perspective, it then, does start out with you as a hotelier, or as somebody who's in those types of operations, to actually ask yourself, well, how do I want to set it up that was different to before? And what could I try and enable if basically I actually had a completely blank slate and I could just push all of my partners to actually deliver the type of experiences that I would want? And what are the types of flexibilities that I would want and demand of them in this time? And I think that kind of mind shift change is the most important thing that I think we can do as an industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities that are available now, I like you said something previously about it's a kind of a disaster, but it's also an opportunity. I forget the exact terms that you used, but now this is when you should
never let a good crisis go to waste. Yeah,
it's actually pretty wise, because in a weird way that we've put this unprecedented pause button on the industry, and now we can kind of look at new things. Bob, do you want to have anything you want to impart as we close this?
For sure. So at Event Temple, one core value we have is to be agile. So, that means the ability to change quickly and to not be trapped in your decisions. So I think by design, some of these old on-premise legacy systems, they, right or wrong, they do sort of trap you and box you in. You don't have the ability to run experiments and try things out and pay monthly, turn it off for a month if you have to. It's just, very set. And the more decisions that you make, Jeff Bezos calls it a one-way door versus a two-way door. Two-way door is a decision where you can always go back. One way, you're stuck with what you picked. And I really love that when I think about making decisions at Event Temple, whether it's on technology or staff. But I would just encourage hotels to think about how can they set themselves up in every way, definitely technology, but in all parts of their business, so that they can change quickly with the times. There's so much uncertainty, and that doesn't mean it's high risk necessarily. It just means we don't know. So in a situation where you don't know, you want to have a lot of options. And I think now the second piece is now is the time to experiment and prepare so that you can try things out. You've heard all of us talk about the future and technology, and we're all passionate and excited about it. But I would encourage hoteliers to go find out for themselves and try things out and test them. And hopping on some trials or watching some videos or even reading some blog posts doesn't mean you have to buy it, but why not just educate and dig in a little bit more? And then I guess my last thought is, I think domestic travel is big right now. So look at ways with your sales and marketing that you can be a community resource. I'm pretty passionate that hotels can be community hubs more than they are. So thinking about publishing content, email marketing with partners. Is there a yoga studio nearby you can partner with? Is there walking trails you can blog about? Just make sure that when people think of your city or town or region, your hotel's coming up in those searches. So I think agility, experimenting, and being a resource would be my three big takeaways.
Yeah, so I'll give you the ending statement on this. He mentioned experimentation, and I think that one of the amazing things that, and you kind of alluded to this, about the SaaS model and what's available from a technology standpoint is it's not a very high hurdle in order to start working with some of these new applications.
No, it's actually very easy. I think the hardest part is the mind itself of the person that has to make that decision. And throughout my years in selling a PMS, most of the time, or very often, hoteliers, the first question they ask is a list of things that their current PMS does, and it has to be there, otherwise they can't migrate. I think that attitude, I would suggest to hoteliers to kind of put that on hold for a moment, and now look forward and see, okay, Now it's a different time. I have a lot less staff, so I have to automate multiple things. SaaS is around now. It's not like 5 years ago. It's a given, it's there. Now I need to, what do I really need to do today as an organization? What do I want from the hotel, and how do I want to implement it? And based on that, look what's out there on the market. And then ignore for a moment some of the things you're so used to that you have. You know, you get reports in your inbox every day. Question yourself every day again, then what do I do with those reports? Do I get them for the last 5 years? Do I actually look at those reports? Do I make decisions on them? A bunch of them probably are just coming in your inbox because that's what they do. So I think if you can just ignore that for a little bit and see where do I go from here, you know, kind of act a little bit maybe like a startup. What are we going to do to make this problem go away? That's probably a very good attitude and a very good way of finding good technology that can help you get out of this, you know, get through this time and recover very nicely, and hopefully be ahead of many other hotels. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all the panelists. I think this has been an invigorating conversation. I wish we could go on longer, but we have a time limit. I just want to remind the audience that we have recorded this and we will be making this available. And so it should be available on everyone's site. They'll be certainly notified if they're on their email list about how to reach this content. But again, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite.